Nice to see you.
You as well. How are things?
You know,
Here we are.
good as can be expected, I suppose.
Right.
Why don't you get us started by telling us who you are, where you are, and what you do?
Sure. My name is Chad Cochran, also known as Cowtownchad. I'm like the guy that ended up in a band with a terrible name, and now it's. And I'm based in Cleveland, Ohio, and I am a live music and portrait photographer, and also a mixed media artist.
Fantastic. We've only met once in person, and it was really just to shake hands at a Frank Turner and Shovels and Rope co-headline show. I still
And
can't believe that happened for real.
it was a moment for sure. I was actually trying to think about that today when it talked about, like, I think you had sent me a couple questions, and one of them was, how did we meet? And I was like, wow, I think it was that one time in Cleveland. It was a total fluke. I turned around and we had that moment where we were like, no way, it's really happening.
Yeah, I still think it's a dream that the two of them did a show together. I think I had an actual dream about it once. So when I heard that it was really happening, I was like, "That somebody's punking me. That can't be right." Um, I want to. Well, let's start with this. What have you been listening to during all of this when we're shut in and can't go to live shows?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty heavy music consumer to begin with. So, um, being on lockdown doesn't change my music habits drastically. I would say, if anything, I've caught a few shows, people doing streaming shows, so it's nice to be able to see some familiar faces. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but music-wise, pretty normal. I've had, Van Darian just put a new record out, and I've listened to it. Caleb Cottle put a new record out. Kellen of Troy. Um, so there's a lot of people that just put records out that I've been listening to. Obviously, been listening to John Prine this week. Um, and, I think that some people, I think unless anybody's ever had a conversation with me, some people see a lot of my work and a lot of the portraits that I do and a lot of the people that I work with, and automatically assume that I'm this huge country. And there's no doubt that Americana has been very kind to me, and I know a ton of great people. But I'm also a total metalhead, so I listen to a lot of rock, a lot of stoner rock, and so I'm definitely stuff that I hadn't been able to dive into too deep.
I'm making myself a note here that when we're done here, I'm gonna send you a link to my friend's weekly metal streaming show.
Yes. All right.
Um, it's like my favorite hour of the whole week every week.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's a genre that I don't know a whole lot about. So I've been in the however long I've started listening to that show. I feel like I'm learning a lot about kind of how the subgenres work, and starting to be able to recognize different bands when he plays them.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm not. I would say that I'm mediocre at best when it comes to new bands. Um, but I grew up in, I'm 48, and so I grew up in that whole hair metal era and fully embraced it. I was into that throughout for a really long time, until I got to college, and then started listening some, a lot more diverse music than what I do in a tiny little Ohio.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about. I grabbed this copy about the I Didn't Want to Tell You series. Tell me maybe how it started and how it's evolved. I know now it's gone beyond only your photos, and there's other photographers you're including as well. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I started this project. I get the timeline mixed up, but around 5 years ago. I mean, so it's been around for a really long time, and I felt like I had a really good idea, and I felt like I had a really good angle when I first got started, and it went everywhere. So I, what the I Didn't Want to Tell You series really, how that got started is started doing some portrait work. I started off as a landscape photographer, kind of like the dark side of Ohio is what I call it. Like, it's that dark and gloomy side of Ohio. And I had a few people reach out to me about doing portraits. So I started getting into portraits, and a lot of the time that I was getting to spend with some of the musicians and people, a lot of the underlying themes tended to be around mental health or addiction. So I had, one of those light bulb moments where I was like, well, I'm still just kind of figuring out how to do portraits. It's not something that I had done in the past, but it's definitely something I had an interest in. I felt like I needed to expand what I was doing. And then when I started doing them and started having, those themes, I thought, what can I do with this? So I came up with the idea of called I Didn't Want to Tell You. And I thought I would give people that I had already done photos with the opportunity to tell me a story about how mental health had affected their life. When I first started the series, I started it with the question was, tell me a secret. So there was like, I wanted it to be a story that maybe they've never told anybody. And so all the friends that I had that I'd done photos with were like, that's a great idea. I mean, I'm not going to do it, but it's really good. It's kind of how it went. And then it was like 2 years later, it just kept like, I couldn't do anything with it. I'd sent it to Rolling Stone and I tried to reach out to Music Cares, and it wasn't going anywhere. And then oddly enough, weren't you just on with Scott Vieth?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Scott was actually a piece of the connective tissue to get this to work. So he had lunch, I think maybe with Adam Keir from No Depression, and had mentioned it to him. And Adam was like, oh, well, we're actually doing a wellness issue coming up. Maybe, connect us and let's take a look at it. And they liked the idea. And I had changed the topic to how has mental health played a role in your life? Mm-hmm. And I immediately sent it out to a handful of people that I worked with in the past, and all of them said yes that quickly. And it was phenomenal. Like within a couple days, I had, John Paul White, Steve Poltz, Elizabeth Cook. This is terrible. Now I've started. Now I'm going to forget somebody. Lydia Lovelace. You've got the book there. Help me out.
Oh, yeah.
Sarah Cook. And I feel like I'm missing one more person. Okay.
Oh, come on.
Oh.
Page 98. By the way, No Depression is a fantastic publication. Steve Poltz, John Paul White, Sarah Shook, Lydia Lovelace, Jamie Harris. Did you say her?
I did. It's the very last. So she can make fun of me later for putting her last.
And Elizabeth Cook. You got them all.
Got them all. Great. And then it worked. And so No Depression put that out in their fall issue, in their wellness issue. And from there, it's really just kind of taken off. I initially, when I started the project, I wanted to be the photographer. I wanted to be the one that did all of the portraits of people. And what I quickly started to realize is that, and the timing worked out great with the pandemic, because what I realized is that there's no way that I can get out and get to all of these people just being me. Even if I traveled every day of the year, I could never get to, all corners of the US that want to participate in this. So it took me a little bit of time, and I built the website, and it's ididn'twanttotellyu.com. And now that the website is up, I don't feel, it's kind of like that, like the mother bear. Like I'm okay with the cubs. Like, it's done, it's up, it's running. I can still help with the content, but the reality is that the whole series was never about the photos. The series was about stories. And what I had decided about a month ago is that I was going to reach out to a handful of other photographers and see if they would be willing to donate some time. Everybody was incredibly great about it and gracious and offered time. But what I also told people is that if you have a photo of yourself that you really like and it works, let's use it. Or if you had photos done with another photographer, I don't really care anymore. Just tell me who the photographer is. I'm happy to credit them.
Right.
And I still do that. So I run the stories on my personal Facebook account, but I also run them on cowtownchad on my Facebook account. I use it on all social media. So I use that moniker, Cow, C-O-W, Town, Chad. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And I also have, I didn't want to tell you, sites for both Twitter and also Instagram, and they're pretty easy to find.
It's wonderful. I think it's fantastic. It's a great project, and I'm excited to see how it's evolving to include more people.
Yeah, it's been I think like the last two or three that I've put up, as soon as I kind of remove those guardrails, people seem to they were excited about that. They're like, okay, great. I've been wanting to do this, but I haven't had the opportunity because you haven't been to Nashville for a while, or you haven't been able to get to, wherever it was. And so I'm excited as well.
Yeah, the timing kind of worked out well in that way.
I it, that would have been a great idea for me to come up with during the pandemic. I just happened to be really lucky that it was a little bit earlier.
Yeah. Speaking of the pandemic, tell me how you're filling your days now that you're not out doing what you normally do. What does a typical day look like for you these days?
Yeah, so I still have a day job. So and I've worked from home for almost the last 20 years. So I still have that going, and it's still I spend my daytime doing that, but my evenings are definitely different. I spend a lot of time in. I mean, it sounds terrible, but I spend a lot of time in bars and concert halls. I mean, that's what I do.
It doesn't sound terrible at all to me.
I think that all of us are, definitely missing that connection with everybody. Um, but I've had the opportunity. I would say that so I've kind of gone through the different phases of the pandemic. I don't know if you've seen like some people have charted out this like process of how you kind of go through these different stages, and like how it's almost like the 7 stages of acceptance or something. And my first bump was mostly around potatoes, like potato chips and mashed potatoes and anything else. And it was just that end of the world doom and gloom, and I'm going to, completely drown my sorrows in eating. So I went through that. And then, we got in like the second week, and I was like, oh my God, none of my clothes are going to fit when we come out of this if I don't fix this. And so after that, my days, like, I feel like I've kind of like gotten on the horse. Like I've created a new schedule. I'm doing a lot of exercising. So I'm luckily, I have one of my old to sell exercise equipment. So I actually have a pretty nice setup in my house. So I've been doing a ton of exercise, just trying to keep my brain moving and my body activated, not just sitting on my couch, which, for those first, nearly 2 weeks was super easy to go down that rabbit hole and stay there. So I'm trying to get outside a little bit, at least 30 minutes to an hour a day, sometimes a little bit longer than that. I'm still walking around, being very, very probably overly cautious, being within 6 feet of people and practicing social distancing. And then, one of the things I've been able to do is I've kind of been diving back into some of my old libraries of photos that I've just never really put out. Oftentimes when I shoot a concert, especially if I'm shooting for a magazine, you see songs, you may take a few hundred photos in those 3 songs, and then you have to turn around and give them 15 or 20 of those photos by 10 a.m. the next morning so they can run them, and then you walk away from them. So it's been kind of fun going back, looking at some of the portrait stuff that I've done with people. I do a pretty decent job on Twitter of trying to throw content up there and alternative edits and portraits that I've been doing. And I do the same thing for my Instagram stories. So I try to pick a different topic on my Instagram stories every day. I'll either share music, I'll share artists that I really like, or I'll share stuff that I've never seen the light of day. So I'll do like behind the scenes, like if I'm backstage someplace and I've shot photos, growing up, that was the stuff that I always loved because you could see like concert photos of people and different things, but when you saw them like backstage on a couch or you know talking to somebody else that was backstage for whatever reason, that's what always connected with me. And so I've tried to find some of those photos too, kind of the behind the scenes stuff to get that out there as well.
Very cool. I think it sounds like you have a pretty healthy approach to all of this and that you arrived there a little bit quickly than maybe some of us have. And I wonder if people who are used to working from home are just adapting better in general.
I would think that's probably, I mean, because the reality is, my world hasn't been disturbed nearly as much as others. So I already had, you know, we had this conversation is that, if you think of somebody who went to an office every day and they're now working at home for 8 or 9 hours, pretty tough to do. If you're single,
Mm-hmm.
if relationship, and now you have two people working at home, depending on the size of somebody's space, that can be very challenging, strictly based on square footage. If you have a child or two children or three children who are now all sharing that space because of the situation with the schools being closed as well, I think that we just have to be incredibly more empathetic. You hear the dogs in the background, or you hear kids talking or yelling or crying, or somebody else also on the phone. It's just the reality of what we're dealing with today. Like I said, I've been lucky enough that for the last 20 years I've worked from home. So this isn't a huge, and I have my own workspace. So, very, I guess, selfishly, I haven't really been disrupted all that much, other than all of the extracurricular things that typically fill my week and days and months. Um, I'm most certainly sad that they don't exist, but most of those things were never things I had to do. Those were all by choice. So I kept myself busy by choice doing all of those things. I certainly miss them, but my real like core of my day hasn't changed drastically.
That's good. That's a fortunate thing. Of those extracurriculars, those don't need to but enjoy doing, what are the things you're most looking forward to being able to do again when the situation changes?
You know, I so one thing I have done is I do watch a lot of documentaries, and I watch a lot on just creatives. So I really want to get back. I mean, I miss concert photography because I mostly just like being there. Like mostly just like the that feel of being in the room. Like I don't know how else to verbalize that unless everybody on here knows exactly what I'm talking about.
We
Uh,
probably do.
yeah, so there's just something about being part of something. Like I miss that, and I miss capturing moments so much because um ew. But I'm really excited to get back in the studio because like I said, I've been watching. I'm really excited to get back in and do more portraits. Um, the biggest unknown is what do concerts look like moving forward? You know, what does portrait photography look like moving forward? Um, am I going to be taking portraits of people from across the room now, with a long lens, as opposed to, that intimacy that you get doing portraits? So I don't know the answer to that. But I miss both of those things a lot. I could be making art. I'm in my art room right now, and I could be in here making stuff all the time. I haven't made one piece of art. I haven't done any of that stuff, and I think that is a completely okay thing. I think that many of us probably saw the people posting saying there's going to be so much great music that's going to come out of this, and there's going to be so much great art that's going to come out of this. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, if you're up to it.
Yeah. I was talking to Morgan Eve Swain an hour ago, and we were talking about how these are not the most ideal conditions for creating right now.
Right. And especially if depending on your situation, like I am incredibly fortunate, I live in a house, and, I'm still working. And so a lot of those stressors that people have right now with being unemployed, especially, I mean, holy cow. I mean, I'm sure that you and I both know plenty of people in Nashville who, sadly they had through a tornado, and very quickly after that, essentially their lives got turned off. There's no touring. I've seen some records get pushed out that were going to get released, and it's just a super, super weird time for everybody. So I feel very fortunate for myself, almost guilty because I have all of those things that are still available to me. But I would say that I'm phenomenally empathetic knowing that there are people out there that are really struggling, um, and I think about that a lot.
Yeah. To wrap up, tell people where they can find more information about you, your photography, um, the series you mentioned. You did mention, but if you could say the URL again, that would be great. Tell us where to find the info.
Sure. Probably the easiest thing is I am pretty well documented everywhere under cowtownchad. So if you go to cowtownchad.com, it'll send you to all the links to my different social media. Chad Cochran is my actual name, so if you want to look that up, that will help too. And then the portrait series on mental health is Want to Tell You, and that's exactly what it is. It's I didn't want to tell you.com, and find me on both of those websites, Cowtown Chad or I didn't want to tell you.com, as well as social media under Cowtown Chad.
Great. Anything else you want to share before we go?
I don't think. Thank you so much for doing this. I usually do a ton of podcasts, and I would say that I was not super really interested in doing anything until now. So it was. I appreciate you reaching out and doing that, and it's good to see your face.
You too, and I'm really glad you took the time to do this. For everyone else who's tuned in, the next one will be at 3 o'clock with Brian Carroll from Redline Roots. I think I saw in the chat that he was joining us. And then at 4 o'clock, I'll be speaking with Ron Benway, who is currently hunkered down in Nevada. And then at 5 o'clock, I'll be speaking with Karen Ledwidge, who got patriated, whatever the word might be. He got sent back to Australia and has been in quarantine for 2 weeks by the government there. So that'll be an interesting story too. When I talk to him at 5 p.m., it'll be something like 7:30 in the morning for him on his final day of quarantine. So we have 3 more to go. Chad, thank you again for taking the time to talk with me. And I hope everyone will go and check out your photos. I'm a big fan of your photography and of that series too.
Thank you. It was wonderful talking to you. Take care, and
Me
hopefully
too. Take care.